Hi everybody, I'm Kevin. Welcome to this episode of How Do I Do? So today we're going to talk about switches. There's three main types of switches that you have in your house, probably. Some are more common than others. We have a single pole switch, which is the most common switch you'll find in your house. Essentially what that one does is from one location you turn on a light, and it's only from one location. It has two screws on the side. The next common one is a three-way switch. A three-way switch has three screws on the sides. And a three-way switch, you can control lights from two locations, but only two. And the least common switch that you'll find in your house is it's called a four-way switch. You need one of these four-way switches if you want to control your lights from more than two places. So I'll explain a little bit about each one of these in more detail and how they work internally and how they work in your circuit. The first thing to know about a switch is whether the switch you're using is rated for the application you're putting it in. Most residential applications, you need a 15 amp switch. When you have a switch in your hand, you'll be able to see what it's rated for because it's always printed on the switch itself. If you see this one, you can see it's upside down here, the manufacturer. You can see the amperage, 15 amp, 120 volt, 277 volts, AC only. A couple of other things that you should be looking for, depending on what country you're in. You see it's UL listed, CSA approved, and it's got a CU, which means it's got the Canadian certifications as well as Underwriter Laboratory certification for the US and in Canada. So you see here, UL listed, and here is the CSA. That means that switch would be rated for any application in Canada. What's important here though is that whatever you're switching does not exceed this here, 115 amps. If you need something that's more than 15 amps, you have to get a 20 amp switch. It's a little bit bigger, more robustly made. So that's very important to know. The other part of it is that if you have aluminum wiring or if you have copper wiring, that matters to the switch. If you have aluminum wiring, as you can see on this switch again, right in here, copper or copper-clad wire only. CU means copper. This switch is not made for aluminum use. So if you have aluminum wiring, you need to buy a specific switch made for aluminum wiring. And it'll be stamped on there, it'll say COALR. That means copper aluminum revised. That's the revised spec for the switch. It has to say that so that you can put aluminum wiring on the terminals. So that said, we'll go to a single pole switch here, and I'll explain to you how this works. It's very simple. The single pole switch has, as I said, two screws. There'll be a wire that comes from your electrical source, either from a downstream switch or plug-in in your home or from the electrical panel, and essentially moving this toggle up and down will close a contact between the two screws. So essentially when it's in the down, off position, there's no contact between this screw and that screw. When you move the switch to the up position, it connects this screw internally to that screw, and that's what turns your lights on. I'm just going to back up here a little bit, explain the differences in switches. There's so many different kinds of switches on the market. This here particular style that you see here has got this little doohickey that goes up and down. That's called a toggle. So that there would be a toggle switch. I have a couple, I have another example here, which is this particular kind, people know this one is a Decora switch. It's kind of a decorative style switch. And you see here, this is more of a rocker action. It rocks back and forth. That's called a rocker switch. Most people call this a Decora switch. It's a rocker switch. You'll see the same kind of idea. On the back here, it has 2 terminals. This again would be a single pole switch. They get pretty fancy. Here's one that's still in the package here. You can see this one here has got 2 toggle switches, but it's kind of in a outlet type of configuration, so it would take a different faceplate. And while we're on the topic of faceplates, you can tell each one of these switches, depending on the box you're installing them in, has a faceplate. So the switch is installed inside the electrical box, which is in the wall, attached to the wall studs behind the faceplate, and then the faceplate is just fastened on over top of the switch, and it's screwed to the switch itself, not to the wall. Depending how many devices you have in your wall plate or in your device box, you might have 2 switches in your wall, and if that's the case, you would need a double gang. They call it a double gang. Single gang means 1, double gang means 2, 3 gang, 4 gang, like that. Well, this is a faceplate for a double gang box, so you can put 2 switches on this one. So for the toggle switches, you'll see a faceplate like this. For the rocker switches or Decora switches, you see a faceplate like this. And if that wasn't enough, that there's different shapes and styles of faceplates, believe it or not, they come in all different colors too. Here's an ivory one. Here's a pretty brown one. And of course the white ones that I was showing you. So these ones here are typically for plugins, but like I showed you this switch, we'd use that faceplate. So we've talked about the faceplates, we've talked about the device box inside, the switch is inside, and the wiring is inside. All the wiring and switch must be inside the device box and then covered with a faceplate. So we've talked about that. We've talked about that single pole switch, and now we talk about the 3-way switch. Now the 3-way switch is a very tricky guy because it gets a lot of people in trouble. People like to replace these switches with the Decora switches because they think these ones look nicer. And that's fine, that's okay, you can do that, but you can't mix up the wiring, especially on a 3-way switch, and I'll show you why. This switch here, if you look at the back, has got 2 brass screws and 1 black screw. Now you can't mix the wiring up between any of the brass screws and the black screw. You can mix it up between brass screws, that's fine, but don't get that wire mixed up. And the reason is, they call this dark screw here the common terminal, and they call these ones just travelers. So what happens inside this switch is that in the down position, there's really no off or on a 3-way, but in the down position, it connects this brown screw to one of the brass screws at the top. When you move the switch up, it now connects the brown screw to the other brass screw at the top. So in one position, the dark black screw is connected to one of the brass screws, and in the other position, this bottom black screw is connected to the opposite brass screw. So it basically just toggles between the 2 screws like that, depending on the position of the switch. So when you take the old switch out of the wall, if you're replacing it, we have to make sure that whatever wire was on this brown screw, when you took it out, it's usually identified as a black screw or a brown screw, or sometimes it's a silver screw and the other ones are brass. But whichever identified screw that this is, that wire must go back on the common screw, or your 3-way circuit won't work anymore. Now we go to the 4-way switch. Now the four-way switch, where did I put it? Oh, here it is. The four-way switch is a very complicated device inside here. When you move this lever up here, there is some kind of magic that goes on inside here. I won't get into it too much, but essentially what happens, there's no on and off again. There's just two positions, up or down. And what happens inside here, you see that on this one they've got two common screws, or two dark screws, and it's identified as, if you see here on the back, I don't know if you can see that, it says input here, and out at the top it says output. So these are made for your incoming travelers, and these are there for your outgoing travelers. I wouldn't get too hung up on the terminology here, but essentially what happens inside here, when this toggle is down, or the switch is in the down position, it essentially connects this dark screw here with the screw above it, and this dark screw down here with the screw above it. Then, when you move the switch up, magically it'll connect this dark screw here across the switch to the brass screw kitty corner, and likewise the dark screw on this side across the switch to the brass screw kitty corner to that. So in one position it connects this screw to this screw and this one to this one, and in the opposite position it's an X. It connects this screw to that screw and this screw to that screw. Now the tricky thing here when you're replacing these ones is to make sure, again, that you get the identified screws here connected to the proper terminals on the new switch. So that's just about it for all the different kinds of switches and all the different kinds of things to look for in a switch. I've showed you how they operate. I've showed you how they work in the circuit. The next thing, I guess, would be to show you how to change one out actually in a wall, and we'll get to that very shortly. So maybe just to clarify a few things here. The single pole switch operates in a circuit all by itself. It doesn't need to work with any other switches to turn lights on from one location. Multiple lights, a single light, it doesn't matter. You turn your lights on from one location only, and that's where you'd use a single pole. Now, if you want to operate your lights from two locations, you need, in each location, a three-way switch. So, in one location, you put your power supply on the common, and you have travelers which go to the other switch, and in another location those travelers are connected and the common goes to your load, to your lights. That way when you turn the lights on in this location, you can turn them off from that location, or if you turn them back on in this location, you can turn them off in that location. So that's how the three-ways work. You always need a set of three-ways in order to make this work in two locations. Now it gets really tricky if you try to do it in three locations. Three locations, at the end of each one you need three-way switches. So in three locations you need at least two three-way switches, one at one end of the circuit, one at the other end of the circuit, and then a four-way switch in the middle. Now, what happens here, I don't know if I can hold all of these for you, but you have a three-way on one end of the circuit, a four-way in the middle of the circuit, and the other three-way at the other end of the circuit. So again, what happens, if you turn it on from one location, you can turn it off from any of the other two locations, and then back on in any of the other two locations. Now, if you want to add more switches, more locations to control the same lights, you simply just keep adding four-way switches in the middle. Now the wiring for this gets pretty tricky. I'm not going to go into all the wiring here, but essentially the travelers from this switch go to the four-way switches from one to the next, and end up on your three-way switch, which inevitably controls your load. It'll always be the three-way switch at one end which receives power, and it'll always be the three-way switch at the other end that distributes the power to the load, to the lights, whatever it is. So that's how those all work. Just wanted to make that clear, because if I ever decide to do a video on how to do wiring in your house, well, you got to be a pretty clever electrician to figure all that out. And sometimes I don't think the average person is really into doing that, but I could give you a video and show you how that's done. It might take a few diagrams and a lot of me talking. So that's it. Now we're going to, I'm going to go ahead and show you what all of this means in a circuit. Okay, folks, so here we are in my home. I did my own wiring and had it inspected by a electrical inspector. He thought I did a pretty good job. But essentially, I installed a circuit here with a four-way switch, and you'll see what I mean here, because if you look, you'll see these nice pendant lights that I have here. And if I can just keep one of them in the camera focus, I have the island right now, and I'll just step aside and I'll show you that in this island that I built, you'll be able to see I've got a switch bank here, and down here is my four-way switch that I installed for the pendant lighting. So if I flip that rocker switch, you'll be able to see that the pendant lights are indeed on. So then you'll see that they're on from that location. And so now I'm going to come back in the frame here, and you'll see if I go all the way to the back of my kitchen over here, I have another switch over here that I installed. This is a three-way switch. This is the one at the end of the circuit that supplies power to the pendant lights. And when I switch this one, of course the lights go out. Over here at my hallway, I have another three-way switch. This is the one at the beginning of my circuit that receives power from the electrical supply. And this three-way switch, if I flip it, oopsie, puts the lights back on again. So that's a typical four-way switch application with a three-way switch at each end, one here. There's a three-way switch here, and a four-way switch way over here. Oops, wrong one. Oh, yeah, four-way switch here. So that's a typical four-way application. Now, if you look over here, I have some lights on the wall here. For a single pole application, oops, sorry about the shaking and all. But for that's pretty simple. You see, I just have a switch right over here. It's just a single pole switch which turns those lights on. So again, if I go back over here and I turn the switch off, the light goes off. It's one location. That's all it does. That's an application for a single pole. So now we have an application for a three-way switch, and it almost looks like a four-way switch. This light up here, you see, from this location, I can turn it on, and then all the way back here, you see these two lights are both on the same circuit, and from here, I can turn it off. So off from there, then I can come back here, turn it on. That's an application for a three-way switch. At one end, it receives power from the electrical supply, and at the other end, it provides the power to the load or to the light. So I hope you understand how that all works. Now I think it's time for me to show you how to change a switch out of an electrical device box. Okay folks, so now we're going to replace a switch out of the wall, and the very first thing we have to do when we check the switch, flick it, and we notice the lights come on. So what does that mean? We have to turn the power off. Do not ever work on a live energized circuit with the power on. It's gonna hurt you. We don't want that. So make sure you turn the power off. Okay, so here we are again. This time we're going to flip the switch on, and looks like the lights didn't come on. That means it's probably safe to take the faceplate off the device here. The switch is the device, covered by a faceplate. You see there's two flathead screws here we need to take out. So we find our little flat blade screwdriver, and just as easily as it sounds, just take those two little screws out. One screw. Two screws. Now, here's a tip for you. Sometimes when these covers are put on, the paint has not been dried properly, and when you take it off, you'll cause the paint to come off with the device cover, and that'll be ugly. We don't want that. So if you, I think in this case, if you just tap it with your fingers, you see, this one I allowed the paint to dry very thoroughly before I put it on, but you can take a knife and just very carefully cut the paint around the device cover, and it'll come off very easily. It just essentially falls right off, right? So I took all my device covers off before I paint. I would say you should do the same too. You can paint right up to the switch, and you can even paint over the screw here. However, when you go to change out your switch after, now you really will have to cut that paint off around the switch, or you'll take big gobs of your wall off with it. So that's the next thing. You'll see that at the top and the bottom of the switch, you have a screw that screws into the device box. The device box is the steel box that's actually inside the wall. So the next thing for us to do is to find a Robertson screwdriver, which, believe it or not, is a Canadian invention. And, oh, it really helps if you get the right size one. Let's see here. Oops. This one. It's a smaller one. We call that one what is that, a number 2 Robertson. So essentially, loosen the screws at the top and bottom of the device, which is the switch. Now, if there's too much paint inside the screw head, the screwdriver may not go in there to engage the screw, in which case you may have to pick it out with the knife. So you'll see, you just take those screws all the way out. This will just take a second here. A little bit stiff coming through there. You make them nice and long just so that your arms can have a workout. Oh, and of course, it's just tight enough that you can't use your fingers. There we go. Okay, so I got both screws out now. Now, carefully, with your knife, you have to carefully trace your paint, trace the switch around the ears of the switch there, so that you don't pull all the paint off the wall when you pull the switch out. Doesn't take much. And you'll notice when it's coming loose or where it's caught just by wiggling on the switch a little bit on this side at the top. You're just cutting paint. It's not a huge thing. So the top is loose. Oh look, the bottom wasn't even embedded that badly. So it's actually pretty good. See that? Loose there. Okay. The next step is grab the top and bottom here and pull it straight out of the wall. Straight out of the wall. Now, in this case, there's two things I want to show you about this. This is a three-way switch. So what did we learn from the last video? It'll have 3 screws, 2 on one side and 1 on the other side. Remember from the last video, there'll be a common screw, which is identified by either being brown, black, or sometimes silver. Well, the other ones will be brass. So here we've got kind of a brown colored screw, and the top 2 are brass, so we have to keep track which wire is on there. And what I suggest for that, put a piece of tape on it. So I carry in my toolkit here red tape. I like to identify things of importance with red tape. And just bust a piece of tape off, right, a little piece. The first thing you do, wrap that wire that's on the identified screw there with a piece of red tape. You can't get it mixed up then. And don't put it right close to the end of the wire. Put it a little ways back. Because I'm going to show you the next thing that's a problem. And interestingly, I didn't mention this in my last video, but these switches have 2 kinds of connections that you can do. One is to wrap the wire around the screw, and the other one is to stab it in the back of the switch. Okay, so now I'm going to show you on this new switch exactly what's going on here in the wall. So you see here, on the back of the switch, there are tiny little holes here, here, and down here. And what these people have done is they basically stripped the insulation off the wire and just pushed that wire right inside that hole, like that. And that's fine, that's allowed to do. And basically by pushing the wire into this hole here, it becomes connected to that screw. And by pushing it into this wire, likely it becomes connected to that screw. And likely for this hole here, it becomes connected to that screw. So that's all good. Now, to get that wire out, it is really hard. I don't like doing it, but essentially you see this where it says here, push to release. So you take a very small screwdriver like this one, and you have to push your screwdriver in here. And essentially what's happening is there's a little metal tab inside here that's pushing up against this hole here, up against the wire that you push in there. So you have to put your screwdriver in there, push in, and kind of pry it down. Push in and pry down all in the same motion, and that will release the mechanism in there that you can pull the wire out. That's what I'm going to try to do here. And I don't recommend doing wiring this way, and I'll explain why in a minute. Just want to make sure I can somehow get this wire out of here. Sorry, I won't be able to show you what I'm doing very well because I'm kind of in the way of the camera. But essentially it's just like I said, push in and kind of pry down, all at the same time you're trying to pull that wire out. This is why I don't like these push-in type terminals. Oh, see? And then you risk damaging the switch like I just did. There's one. No, folks, I'm going to show you. Okay, just push in and they just pop out. You have to be a little more careful than I was there because what has happened is I've pushed in on this one and moved the screwdriver around too much, and I've broken the switch. I would not recommend using this switch anymore. I would throw this away and get a new one. But we're replacing it anyways, so I guess it's a moot point. But so essentially, pushing in on this little tab in here has released the wires out. I got them out, and you'll see them here. I'll just maybe just zoom in on those a little bit for you so that you can see what I've got there. Sorry. So there's what we have. So that's the three-way switch I'm working on. Now you see I've got these three wires sticking out of the wall there. And I've identified this one with the tape, so that's going to go to our common screw. And these are what we call the travelers. So those will go off to the next switch. So key in a three-way switch replacement, make sure you identify the common wire that was on the colored screw. So now we have the new switch. The new switch is here. And on the back of the new switch, you see it's not broken like the other one was. So it's got the common wire is the black one here, and then the two brass ones. So like I said in the last video, if you mix up the wiring on the two brass ones, that doesn't matter. Just don't mix them up with the common screw. So I don't like these push-in connections. So the reason is because they're a little tricky to get out. When the switch gets old and you take it out, later they get brittle with age, and that's kind of a minor thing. The most important thing about not using those is it's just a little spring tab pushing against the wire, and it doesn't, in my opinion, make good enough contact to be reliable. I would say the good wrapped conductor to be wrapped around the screw, that's the most reliable connection. So what I do with these, make sure you have at least ½ an inch of wire sticking out, which we do. Just simply take a needle nose pliers. This is a pretty good trick. And if you see there, just leave about, just a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch just beyond the tip of the needle nose pliers. Squeeze onto it and just turn the pliers completely all the way around, and then back about a 1/4 of a turn, 1/8 of a turn, and you'll see it forms a beautiful little loop in the wire like that, which fits perfectly around a screw for a device. You see that? So we do that to all the conductors. Again, just to leave a little bit at the end of the pliers there. Oh, I'm a little clumsy. First day with my thumbs, sorry. Grab on and just turn the pliers all the way around, and then back just a little bit, all the way around and back just a little bit. It makes that beautiful little loop. I find 5/8 is the magic number. If you can strip 5/8 of wire off, then you've got it just about bang on. So once you have these loops on there, it's time to attach the switch. Now, again, with your small screwdriver, I like to use the number 2 Robertson in there, just because it fits nice and snug. So this is, again, how come I can't show you this? This common screw, and we've identified the common wire. So we're going to take the the wire. We can manhandle that around pretty good there. Make sure to unscrew the screw all the way as far as it'll go. It'll kind of stop at the end. Don't force it. It's just a snug little thing. You want to put the loop of the wire in the direction of the clockwise turning of the screw. That way when you screw down on the wire, it forces the wire to close around the screw. So just put it around there, around the screw, kind of pull on the switch a little bit to put tension on the wire so that that conductor is wrapped around the base of the screw. and then just thread that on there. Just snug it first. We'll come back to it. And put your travelers on the same way, clockwise around the screw. With my thumb, I'm keeping tension on the wire while I thread the screw in. And you can turn the switch up the other way here, and you'll see that this wire here, you can just twist the loop around on the wire whichever way you need it to get it around the screw, and push it around the screw, pulling a little bit on the switch to keep tension there. Just like that. Okay, now we've got all the wires in place. We're just going to snug them up tight. 1, 2, and 3. I'm just going to stop here and talk about terminating wire on these things. In our first video, we talked about aluminum wiring. If you have aluminum wiring in your house, we also talked about that you need a very special switch for that. One that's stamped with CO, ALR, copper, aluminum revised. That's the spec given to switches which are allowed to accept aluminum wiring. If that's the case, you would take your aluminum wiring, and before you do anything, you have to sand the ends of the wire a little bit with sandpaper, and then there's an antioxidant paste, anti-oxidizing paste that you have to put on the end of the wire before you terminate it on the screw. Now, if that's not enough, after you do the installation and put it all back together again, you have to come back to that thing in about 3 months and retighten the screws, because what happens is the aluminum compresses as the current goes through it, and the terminations become loose. So you have to go back and tighten them all again. So keep that in mind if you have aluminum wiring. Now, the best way to get the switch and wiring back in the wall is pull it kind of all straight out, reach back into the box so that you can tell that the wire is, so that you form a bend in the wire before the bottom of the box, form a bend in it. And what you're trying to do is make it go up and down inside the box make it go up and down inside the box to make room for the switch. So you see here, you're making kind of like an M shape, up, down, and it just gives the wire a chance to fold up inside there. So just push it right up there, and with your number 2 Robertson, simply put the screws back into the top of the device box. Just get them started first of all, because you may have to move it around a little bit to get the holes lined up. And then once you get them both in there, you're off to the races. And just tighten them up. Now, if you're replacing a switch, and remember we cut the paint to allow for the switch to come off, just try to line up the ears of the switch here with where the paint was removed. And it's not such a big deal with a single gang device box like this one, because you're not trying to line up a bunch of switches. But if you have a double gang, or even worse, a 3-gang device box, the spacing between your switches is critical, simply because the faceplate won't go on properly if you don't have your switches spaced out properly. Now you see these screws go through a slotted hole, so there's a little bit of wiggle room in the switch that you can move it left and right to make it fit in the faceplate. And that's important on a double gang, 3 gang, 4 gang, 5 gang box, because the holes that are cut out in your device cover have to go around, of course, the part of the switch there, and if you don't have your switches spaced out correctly, they won't line up with these holes, so you have to kind of mess around with that a little bit to get them to work. So you put your device faceplate back over your switch, and essentially the faceplate screws back onto the switch, right? There's no connection to the device box for this type, so you just put those screws back on there. Just like that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that these are very fragile faceplates. Unless you've got the unbreakable nylon plates, man, you do not want to tighten those screws too much, because instantly you get that nasty cracking sound, and you'll see a nice crack in there, and then that'll frustrate you because now you're going to make another trip to the hardware store. So that's it. So we've installed the faceplate on there. We didn't crack it, so I'm not going to make another trip to the hardware store. And the only thing left to do now is to turn the power back on. And I urge you, please do not turn the power on before you put that faceplate on there. That's not a safe thing to do. So I'm going to run downstairs and turn the breaker on. Okay guys, so I've put the circuit breaker on. We have our switch back in the wall. All there is left to do is give it a flip. Oh, and lo and behold, looks like the lights are on up there. Well, you can't hardly see it from here, but you can kind of see a glow up there, indicating that yes, the lights are on. So that's it. We've replaced the switch in the wall. I've shown you how to take care of the pressed-in connections in the back and how to do a proper loop termination around the screw. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you like what you saw, subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you all next time.